That is what God is manifesting for us in this convention. That's what we have come to see. The hand of God in action. When it comes to the hand of God, one of the key criteria for experiencing the mighty hand of God is humility. 1 Peter 5 verse 5, it says, be submitted one to another. You elders, be submitted to the younger, and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. It now says, therefore, because God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble, he said, therefore, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due season. So, in other words, the hand of God, our relationship to the hand of God, our response to the hand of God is humility. So I want to, and I know humility is not anything new here. In one shade or the other, every speaker that's spoken this morning has talked about that humility. But I want to talk about, kind of subtle pride and subtle, this kind of, you don't know that you are proud, or partial humility, because it's in levels. Because the Bible says Moses was the meekest man on the earth. Now, that means Moses was the most humble man on the earth. Now, if he's the most humble man on the earth, or like NKJV says, he was more humble than all men on earth, that means that humility is comparable. You see, when you say good, better, best. Good, better, best means that there's comparison. That means there are levels in the thing. That means, there's kind of, you can grade it. So when they measured it, what I call, a humilitometer. When God has a humilitometer, when God measured it, found out the level of Moses' own was more than the level of all other men. Because if it doesn't have a measure, it can't be compared. So for it to be compared, it means there's a measure. So there was something about Moses that Moses' level of humility was more than all men of the earth. And so we must try to identify and always keep ourselves in a place where we optimize on a daily basis our humility. Because sometimes people walk into disaster because of the absence of humility. Walk into outright disaster. And there's been a few disasters in our nation of late. Some of these collapse things and all. You wonder, how can you just walk into an epoch-making disaster? So this is one of the things to look at, so that a person can be humble in various areas, but in a particular area, not be humble. And that can actually open the door to Satan in that area. So I want to talk about 6 lessons, just 6 lessons on pride and humility. I just read them out. The reason why many are not seeing the mighty hand of God is because humility is absent. Because when sometimes people are not humble and they don't know that they are not humble. Second is that if you are not committed to humility, God is committed to resisting you. There's no cure on earth for the absence of humility. 2 Samuel 22 verse 28 says, you will save the humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty, that you may bring them down. So if you are proud without knowing, then you'll be resisted or rejected without knowing why. Eliab's story is a very, very pathetic story. Because Samuel the prophet came to Jesse's house. He saw Eliab and said, this one is he. So Samuel said, this is he. Was about to anoint him. And then God said a most intriguing comment concerning Eliab. He said, this is not he, because I have rejected him. That word rejected is what is perplexing. Because to be rejected, you have to be considered. God could have just told Samuel that, look, this is not, this is not him. And it will not be, he doesn't have any explanation why. He just said, this is not him. Choose the other person. But God said, I have rejected him. So, how was Eliab rejected? And why was Eliab rejected without knowing? These are some of the subtle consequences of salient pride. May we not be rejected without knowing why. The third lesson is the absence of humility gives room to Satan. Proverbs 16 verse 8, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Humility brings exaltation, pride brings a fall. When a proud person receives warning of a danger he cannot see, pride does not make them take correction. So they fall into disaster they don't know. This is so important. Because Naaman, the Syrian general, would have died of leprosy if he did not listen to the voice of a slave girl in his house. He could have died of leprosy, even though he was a Syrian general. So sometimes that humility to listen all around, both from our fathers, because sometimes also there's information around your environment, information that can be helpful. Number 4, pride is when you are taught the word of God to correct your behavior and yet you refuse to correct your ways. Like Bishop Simeon was saying, this idea is very prevalent in this generation. Nobody can tell me what to do. Nobody can tell me what to do. God sends men to us. I like what you read, Dr. Angela, that God said he was going to come down to help Israel out of Egypt, and he sent them a man. So when we come, even as ministers, and we listen to the words of our Father, that word is supposed to mold us and correct us.